back to Zodiac Trading. So today we're going to discuss intensively about the Japanese economy. We're going to discuss about how the bubble was going to bust, and how the Japanese economy was suffering the recession during the 1990s. And right now, currently, we're seeing Japanese Nikkei going back up. We're seeing good inflation in Japanese economy, but Japanese economy used to be really deflationary for a very long time. What I mean by deflationary actually mean you don't have very stable inflation, thus you don't have a stable economic expansion. And that is the reason why Japanese people suffer a lot, and Japanese people are very skeptical, and they are reluctant to take any risk in the financial market up to now. So if you actually live in Japan, then you know the ordinary people, they don't really get much of salary, and also they are not going to get a lot of raise in the salary as well. And if you compare with all these expenses 20 years ago, and you go to Japan, if you go and enjoy, for example, katsudon and different kind of dishes, sushi, you don't see much of the price growth, because Japanese restaurants and many industries are reluctant to raise the price. And thus, that's the reason why if you're an employee working in a Japanese kaisha, you're working for a Japanese company, it's quite difficult for you to get any salary raise. Of course, it will be a stable career if you become the official employee. It would be extremely difficult for the company to fire you, but that doesn't mean that you're going anywhere. So that is what really happened to today's Japanese society. So what happened in 1990s? There are several reasons causing the Japanese economy bubble kind of burst. And I think a lot of economists describe the 1990s is called the lost decade for Japan. So far the 2000s look really bad, So Japan right now currently has suffered the loss to the even 3 decades. The syndrome is you don't get as much GDP growth, you don't get inflation, you don't get expansion, you have very low tolerance of risk, because Japanese consumer reluctant to spend more money. They're always saving money, so the youngsters don't really get much of salary raise. They don't get really good career, and as a matter of results, if you are Japanese citizens, your residence is extremely difficult to change your destiny. Say if you are raising from poor family or poor family background, you don't really get much choice. It's very similar to what happened to Korea. So back then, 1990s, Japan used to be a legend. Used to be the Japanese economy was a hit, very, very popular topic discussed by most of the U.S. economists and European economists because they call the Japanese economy as a miracle. Okay, so this is literally what happened. Then for these second tier economies, they're always you know they are becoming wealthy. That's because they are selling books, and every time if China expands China, and then they call China as a miracle, and then they call Japan as used to be a miracle, and then they're gonna have so many miracles, and right now, and probably in the near future, they're going to call India the next miracle, right? So because that kind of books is what you will probably pay good bucks in the airport, right? So we every time I tell jokes with my economist friends and traders friends, it's always like that you are trying to these economists are just trying to sell you a myth. They're try to sell you a bubble by writing about the bubble, right? So this is basically what happens. So people used to admire what the Japanese economy has achieved. But then the Japanese economy was having these huge progress. It made so much money. It produces really high quality and low cost products. Hence why people were buying Japanese electronic equipments. People were buying Japanese cars, and you see a huge trade. Um, you see a very good trade surplus compared to U.S. because U.S. and people around the world are always buying made in Japan kind of products. It's quite similar to what happened in China, right? Like 10 to 20 years ago, because China used to be a wool factory and Japan used to be a wool factory as well. But then, the Japanese company shifting their cost center around the world. So they are moving their factories to China, and they're moving their factories to Thailand or maybe to other countries to cut down their cost. But then back then, Japan used to be in a very similar position like China right now. So you see a huge trade surplus, and Japanese people are making huge amount of money by trading with developed countries. They are making profits, then the economy goes really well. People have quick salary raise. People can afford house really easy because there's just job opportunities everywhere. And then Japanese yen were very strong, and the housing bubble was, booming. So everything looks extremely good. And then what happened next is you start seeing a lot of Japanese people start to speculate in the stock market. This is how literally how every bubble would stimulate and how the bubble would form, is that you have more speculators to speculate in the market than the real actual investors. So you're seeing people speculate the lands. People are speculating the office, all these assets. So if you combine with all the lands and properties assets in Japan or maybe Tokyo, you could literally use the bubble to buy out the U.S. All these expensive condo. So apparently that is the results out of really over easing economy, because the Japanese bank trying to have what we call it as easing, right? So because in order to boost economy, that your monetary policy should be kind of easing, and that is the first reason why Japanese economy, you have the bubble busting, you have this first stage of how bubble were stimulated and how this bubble would form, because the bank was easing, because the economy was growing good, and Japan versus America, and Japan has a huge trade surplus. So as we can see from here, the government Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi is trying to implement reform measures. This is what happened after the 1990s. Um, it's kind of like it turned out to be quite a big scandal in the future. That kind of brings another heat to the Japanese economy, because he's trying to privatize the postal service, putting all the banks together, putting all these highway construction together, and then have a bank reform. So that we call this Postal Bank of Japan. He kind of suck up all the leverage from the Japanese economy. So this is something really interesting about this postal bank in Japan, is that in Japan, like Japanese, depositors, they love to put their money and saving in the postal banks. So you have a huge monster of finance, which is the postal bank. And then that kind of postal bank is involved in some heavy scandal. It's over leveraged and it's highly corrupted. And then it just kind of blow up. So it's kind of like a huge financial institution too big to fail situation. And that's bringing another heat to the Japanese already down economy. So also, if we look at the late 1980s, what really happened is you're seeing the entire index was peaked in 1991. So the land price more than doubled. So the turning point for the land price is 1 year later than the stock market. So you start seeing a stock market as the um, warning sign. So you start seeing stock market peak, and then you start seeing the turning point of the land price. And then the land price index has declined afterwards. So urban land price rose more than fell harder. Rural land saw similar price movement, but with smaller amplitude. So what really happened is because the bank was easing. The reason why, if you look at different economy system, you see the very similar economic cycle. You start seeing when you're in the stage one, you have economy booming, you have foreign investments come in, you have more job and labor opportunities, you have a booming market, and then your economy is slowly getting overheated. You're going to have more speculators than investors. People speculate for the lands, people speculate the assets, so the asset price would just boom very quickly. So during this stage, you will have more millionaires and billionaires than you will realize. So you just have easy money. So because you are in the bubble, so people become really, wealthy very easily, especially when they are using the banks. They are borrowing money from the financial institutions, and usually the government is going to lower the interest rate to keep this game going. So what would happen is next you're going to see the system over leveraging and then quickly go bust, or you can start seeing the banks trying to shrink balance sheet, trying to raise interest rate to stop the hot money from overflowing in the financial cycle or in the financial system. So that's really happened in the stage three. So in the stage four is that you are having the economy bubble bust, and you're going to have a lot of bad debt. You're going to have a debt issue, and your currency is going to have take a huge fall, and then your unemployment rate will just skyrocket. And at the same time, your land property price will just go down. Okay, so if you are doing well, if you're a responsible government and you're doing, some great actions, that bubble wouldn't be like burst so quickly, so systemically. But in this case, um, the Japanese bubble, in my view, because the banks are so aggressively deregulate, and then the central banks are also in that time easing the rate. That just kind of create environment of quickly, boom and bust kind of situation. So for Japanese economy system, they are not very ready for the rapid change of the economic, for the economic change. So that's why, uh, and also you're seeing the Japanese central bank had a huge disagreement with their treasury. So you have these two bureaucrats competing with each other because in Japan, the treasury system used to be larger than the central bank. But then the modern central bank needs an independent position. So that means modern central banks should not be regulated by, be regulated by the treasury. So that's why central banks are having these political power conflict in order, to gain the full control of the Japanese economy. So that's why you kind of just create a conflict of interest with the ordinary taxpayers. So then, without listening to the central bank, the treasury, however, is easing, and also uh, the central banks are taking aggressive move, and that's why um, you have the system going, like the economy system and leverage going bust very quickly. So because back then Japanese banks were tightly regulated by Minister of Finance, there was a little incentive to innovate. But as long as the banks remained in the regime, they were assumed to have an adequate profit margin and protected against bankruptcy. So you're seeing this huge umbrella. If you're a bank and a large financial institutions in Japan, you won't die, you won't fail. Okay, so that just give bankers a lot of collaterals to play with. So that just give bureaucrats imminent power to play with that financial system. Of course, they make a lot of money for themselves, but not for the taxpayers. But this system began to remove in 1980s as competition began. Banks lost rents and franchise value of being a bank. So at the same time, large corporate customers move away from banks borrowing toward other financing, which retain profit, corporate bond issue, insurance, and access to international financial markets. As the Japanese bank lost large corporate customers, they rushed to find new and more risky borrowers in projects and medium enterprises and land property and property investments. So what really happened back then in Japan was like they have these window guidance system. So because the Japanese, bank would start, they would have a strategy or maybe policy, maybe in some area that they think are, have bright future. They will just give a huge amount of loans to companies and entrepreneurs in that field. So it's extremely easy to get these loans, and usually you get very low rate loans. So apparently these loans can be retrieved because they just a lot of loans are being just misused. So the banks are not doing really good job when you're talking about internal management. So Japanese bank lack the ability to correctly evaluate these new borrowers and projects. That means leveraging. That means that you're lending money to people that you shouldn't, and you're giving them more money than you should. So when economy was booming in the late 1980s, they are overlent. That means over leveraged. When the bubble ended, these loans became huge mountain of bad debt. Okay, so now basically explain what really happened in the deleveraging process, and the second view was the monetary explanation, which is more of a macro perspective. For the last one was actually from the traditional banking perspective because banks are having the regulations. They have banks are lending more money than they should, and they do not really carefully evaluate their customers, so they ended up creating a mountain of bad debt. And the second point is that you see a monetary problem, and you're seeing this macro environment which is going against Japan because, as I was talking about, there was a trade surplus. So the U.S. Forcibly asked Japan to have these Plaza Agreement to in order. Basically it's another version of trade war. If you look at how what U.S. has done to China, uh, that was basically the second version of Plaza Accord because that in the same time the U.S. is forcing Japanese yen to go up and the dollar to go down. That makes uh, because that's essentially making the U.S. products more affordable because the currency is cheaper. In the same time, forcing the Japanese yen go up by doing that, that means the currency gonna be more expensive. That's why if you buy the Japanese products, it will be less affordable. So because of that macro reasons, you're seeing these a lot of companies are having bad times because competing with weaker dollar product, and they kind of lose because they this is a trade war. If you can sell your product cheaper, that basically means that you can just do whatever you want. You make more money. So Japanese companies, they lost. They were taking huge loss during that period. Okay. So and in 1985, the sharp yen appreciation, which is the Plaza Accord that I have mentioned, the Bank of Japan lowered short-term interest rate and eased money in response. So as I have mentioned before, I said in 1990s, during 1980s and 1990s, that in the Japanese central bank decided that okay, if today we're going to raise yen's value, then we're going to ease the money. We're going to lower the interest rate. So, because it's already difficult to sell product to US and other countries because your product is basically more expensive. And if you are making this interest rate higher, then you are giving a really hard time for the Japanese SME, small, medium companies. So you have an easing environment that just kind of fuel the economic bubble. So the Bank of Japan policy reaction functions such traditionally. Japan's monetary policy respond positively, becomes explanatory. So yen appreciation, domestic recession. So that's in the short run, that may look promising because in the short run, it's a expansionary. You see low rate, you see people are making money speculating, over leveraging in the stock market, creating a bubble. But then you're seeing, on the other hand, you're seeing Japanese companies making less profits when actually selling products. We're not talking about speculating. We're talking about manufacturing and exporting products. You're seeing less exporting. You're seeing less profitable trades. But then you're seeing more aggressively, leveraging and stock surge in the stock market. So you're seeing the divergence there, right? You're seeing bubble going up, but in the same time, strangely, your companies are not making as much money. So turns out a lot of people would rather speculate in a stock than to actually produce something or anything. So many blame the Bank of Japan, especially Governor Satoshi Sumida, for easing too much and too long. So I think too much might not be the case, but too long would definitely be the case because when your yen is going strong, I think it would be reasonable to lower the rate for some time. But if that's taken too long, that bubble would just become too big. So that bubble would, if the leverage become too big, and then you will have, huge backslash when the bubble cannot be self-sufficient. Okay, so price inflation was close to zero at the time. The Bank of Japan could not find good reason to tight money and asset price increase everyone is enjoying. It's like a party. It's meant to be over. But then the party holder is like, screw this. I'm going to keep partying until everyone drop dead. So that's the case. Then you are having a very long party than you should have. Okay. So that was a signaling problem. When asset price rise, good price is stable, and is liquidity excessive or not? Definitely yes. This data shows that the growth of broad money at M2 Plus CD accelerated to more than 10% during 1987 and 1989. That explains, that's self-explanatory because the M2 aggressively expands, that you are seeing more money circulation. You are seeing the more money supply fueling the leverage in the financial system. So this seemed to be a bit high for an economy growing at 4% from end 1999. The new Bank of Japan Governor Yasushi Miyano deliberately tightened money and raised interest rate. So it's kind of too late, because it's end of 1999. It's already like 20 years. So you've been lowering the interest rate for too long. And then you should have raised that interest rate earlier. You have to probably, if Japan's minister have raised interest rate and enter the balance sheet shrinking process earlier, I think the Japanese economy bubble would be better off. Okay, so um, that would be, I think, would be the case. Okay, so these two explanations are not mutually exclusive. The regulation explains why reckless projects began to be financed, and monetary expansion explain why bubble is continued for so long. So these two reasons cause structural and macroeconomic reasons, respectively. So, so that's why the asset bubble was being created. So there are several phenomena happened. I think you can actually learn something from that. First of all, those who had lands become very rich and who didn't have little chance of buying their home. this increased inequality and social injustice. Of course, that still happened till now, up to now. And rich people purchase expensive clothes, cars, and they'll travel road and spend money. So people, Japanese people, they just go around the world. This entire thing look extremely similar to what China is going through, because China used to be real rich, and now it still have a lot of rich people, and they just, yeah, take the bubble and go to other countries to spend. And since vacant land was more valuable assets, easier to sell than built land, the Yazuka was mobilized to demolish the building illegally and forced the owner to sell the lands. Sometimes Yazuka drove a truck into a house and destroyed it. Well, I mean, that happened in China as well. Okay, so too many office buildings were built in urban areas, still empty for years to follow. Same thing happened in Guangzhou, Shanghai, and many different provinces in China. Too many amusement parks developed and resort hotels. When you see a lot of resorts, these kind of ghosty, abandoned theme park, that used to be that could be really good signal of, if you're seeing a good amusement parks or theme park going bankrupt, that's definitely a good signal to tell if that economic bubble has ended, because when you're entering the other business cycle, or maybe you're entering another economic cycle, you start seeing all these abandoned amusement parks. And right now they just many YouTubers just go there and find ghosts or whatever they want. So that's definitely one of the very interesting signal. And you start seeing all these resorts, hotel being abandoned. You see Thailand, it just so many different places have these abandoned resorts and hotel. Some of it, just kind of ghosty. It's just interesting because that's the byproduct of economic bubble collapse. So you're seeing a large number of male construction workers from Middle East, especially Iran, who will come and work in Japan. Well, an interesting indicator, because if you see more Turkey people selling ice cream, that would be an interesting signal. Because, well, Turkey, I'm not trying to be unfair, but you know what Turkey as a country is. It's kind of awful. It's kind of bit authoritarian country. So people right there, if you see more Turkish people selling shish kebab, or maybe selling Turkish ice cream, then well, probably you're in a bubble, because your economy attracts these immigrants. Okay, so this decade-long recession and deflation, this kind of whole thing actually form the Japanese bubble. And then when a bubble busts, Japan's economy is suffering very, very huge economic and long economic recession. So this is the diffusion index. It's an index to show a general trend of the economy. So the diffusion index of business conditions show last decade was not informed across time. So the business condition was bad in 1992 to 1993, initial bubble bust, and 1997 to 1998, consumption tax hike and banking crisis. And as I have mentioned before, the postal crisis, the postal bank thing. Next time if I have time, I could make another video about the postal bank. I've been doing a lot of case study of Japan, because postal bank is definitely some interesting case to look at. In 2001, U.S. and global IT recession. So in between, economic performance was not so bad. A few times, the Japanese economy began to recover, but each time the recovery was short-lived. So what happened before 2020? There was inflation hike, but only for a short while, and then the inflation rate just kind of dropped back down. So in 1996, real growth was at 3.5%, which was highest among G7. And right now, and back then, you see weak yen. But in April 1997, they decided to restore fiscal soundness, so they have raised that consumption tax. And then that consumption tax is being lowered by the Abenomics. So because they've been raising tax. So the economy just, as a result, just kind of weakened immediately because, this is what happened in emerging economy is that if you put much tax, if you don't put in much, if you do not add much tax, the fiscal system gonna have problem. You're gonna have deficit. You're going to have more debt. But if you do not put the tax, or if you're, putting more tax than you should, then the company performance will just shrink, and you are going to see the economy weaken immediately. Okay, so this is what happened with the bubble bust. So you start seeing growth rate kind of drop very quickly during 1990s. You see nominal GDP, real GDP, industrial production going to the new low. And then it kind of fluctuates from 1993 and then bottom again in 1998. And back, it comes back again in 2000, the year of 2000, and then take another hit. So the big question is why Japanese economy remains so weak. So economy is still debating. So one is cyclical. Okay, it's a cycle thing. Another explanation, blame the bank. Non-performing loans, meaning bad debt. The third explanation, Japanese economy system become obsolete, means low efficient, means you have a very huge and burdensome physical system, low efficiency. So that's kind of creating the problem. And the fourth explanation is that long-term change in Japanese society. So aging population and government debt. I actually think is that asset prices is the trigger because when youngsters are facing economic recession, the first thing they're gonna do is they are going to stop partying. They're going to stop finding their wives. So in order to live happily, they will probably stop dating. I think that would be the first reason, the primary reason why the entire thing of the Japanese aging population thing. So the more recently, the loss of competitiveness of hollowing out phenomenon. Yes, you have companies investing abroad because you have a very weak yen. Japanese talents go abroad. They want to make money in other countries instead of making money in the domestic market. That's because the youngsters and the X generations, they are not finding a lot of hopes inside of Japanese corporate ladder. They are not going to find more opportunities. And they are also having really bad time in all these corporate ladder because it's almost impossible for them to change their life. So that consequently, a lot of Japanese people just decided to work abroad. So that's the reason why the Japanese economy system is weakened up to now. Okay, so thank you guys for watching. Today I've talked about what really happened inside of the Japanese bubble bust and entire recession thing. And I hope you guys enjoy. And I wonder if you guys what you guys think of the economic bubble bust, and do you actually believe the Japanese asset bubble was pure cyclical? And if you're a Japanese people, you can tell me what you actually think about what's really happened to this society. Maybe you can share something that we don't really know about. Okay, so thank you guys for watching. If you'd like to comment, please leave comments below. I will see you in next episode. Goodbye.